Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and my colleague just said he wanted to make this more real. I want to introduce into the record a statement by Olivia Caceres, a mother who participated in a caravan during the fall of 2017, into the record. She's from may I go into the record?
Not objecting.
So Olivia's from El Salvador, one of the deadliest countries that's not in a war zone, and she talks about how difficult it is to turn yourself in. She talks about what it's like to be intimidated by agents and being separated from her child. For 85 days, her 15-month-old baby had been separated, and her child was never the same and has come back. And those are real stories. That is what is happening. Now, we love to talk about this issue about the MS-13 gangs. We love to paint immigrants as criminals. That is not the complete facts. And that is very offensive for me to see continuing to happen, is continuing to message this anti-immigrant agenda. There are many of lots of good immigrants. And then I hear this rhetoric, more DACA-like people. Guess what? DACA-like people are the people we need in this country. They've served this country, they've gone to college, they produce, and they contribute to the economy. So to put them into the same category is completely offensive. Now, I happen to know about some of these people who come over and seek asylum. Why? Because I represented a family, an unaccompanied minor, when I was an attorney on a pro bono level, and I had to go find his mom, who was also in detention. Now, it is extremely hard to get asylum. It is very hard to get asylum. The standard is very hard, and it's very high. Now, I had unlimited resources at a big law firm. I could hire experts. And even then, I couldn't get asylum. Was it a fraud? No. Did she and they get protections? Yes, under a different category. It took years. But there are people who come to this country because they're fleeing the violence. In my particular case, they already killed one of her sons. Guess what? When one of your children has killed and you have one left, you are going to run. You are going to try to seek safe haven. And so it makes me sick to my stomach to keep hearing over and over again, painting the broad stroke and the picture as though these are folks who are coming here to do harm. And so, you know, it's just unbelievable to me how this rhetoric continues, and to see it continue in a campaign season just gets even worse and worse. And just because you don't get asylum doesn't mean that it's a fraud. And I think that's something that's just so important for me to state. Now, I want to move on to the issue of family separation. According to the New York Times, more than 700 children had to be taken from adults claiming to be their parents since October, including more than 100 children under the age of 4. Secretary Nielsen disputed this figure at a May 15th Senate Homeland hearing. She said that the 700 children figure was an HHS number and not a DHS figure. Does anybody on this panel know what the DHS figure is?
We can, for the record, get back to you with the actual number of people who were in CBP custody and was either unable to determine whether there was a familial relationship that we could prove and were comfortable with, or somebody was prosecuted under the having crossed the border illegally, and then that caused a family separation. We can get back to you and give you the exact number of that.
Okay, and let me tell you, it is hard for some of these families when they're fleeing violence and they're leaving their country. They're not exactly saying, oh, let me go look for documentation so that I can prove this is my child. I had a hard time in my own case having to find people there on the ground to get the documents that we needed to make a case. Right? People are leaving because they're in distress, because they're facing violence and they're fearful. Right? It's not generally something they're thinking about before they take off. How do I prove this is my child? I'll tell you right now, if I had to go find something to prove my relationship with my mother, it'd probably take me a little while. So I understand how difficult this is. Can you tell me how we are counting and tracking children that are separated from children?
So everybody that's taken into custody, it goes through the sort of a booking procedure, right? We get the biographical information, and so all of that is in the documentation systems at CBP. So that's how we try to establish whether they're related or not, using those documents. That all becomes part of their record, because as they come in, that part of that processing is referring them for a removal hearing.
Great, thank you. I yield back.
Can I respond to the speech that was made?
Absolutely.
First of all, no one on this panel is anti-immigrant. We're law enforcement officers to enforce the law that you all enacted. So to sit there and say that we're anti-immigrant is just wrong. We are enforcing laws. If you think it's okay to enter this country legally and they shouldn't be arrested, that's just wrong. The laws clearly state enter the country legally is a crime. And no one's up here saying all illegal aliens are criminals. A certain percentage of them are criminals. They commit yet another offense after they're here. I have said many times, I certainly understand the plight of these people, and I feel bad for some of these people, but I have a job to do. I have to enforce the law and uphold the oath that I took to enact the laws enacted by you, Congress.
Thank you, Director Coleman. General Leader's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Mr. Rogers from Alabama for 5 minutes. Yes, the chair now recognizes Ms. Marigon from California for 5 minutes.
You know, I heard the comment that the fact that only 20% qualify for asylum means that there's an abuse happening. One of the reasons it could be so low is because these people are not entitled to counsel. And as I mentioned, it is very hard to meet the legal requirements. You almost cannot increase the standard. It is already so high. I actually believe if we gave people counsel, you would see that 20% number increase, and by quite a bit. And so I'm not sure, I don't think the logic follows that because only 20% are granted asylum, therefore there's all these abuses. Having been in the system, having litigated asylum cases, I know firsthand how challenging it is, and I know the difference it makes when you do have counsel. Most people who don't have an extremely difficult time because it is so high. I want to go back to the issue of, I think, Mr. Cessna, that you had mentioned. How does USCIS determine a person's asylum claim is fraudulent? Like, how is that assessment made?
Well, the person could just be ineligible, flat out ineligible. That's different from being fraudulent. Both things are happening, and
yeah, I want to know about the fraudulent.
Right.
How did you guys determine if an asylum claim is fraudulent?
I think if the person says something that manifestly does not conform to the facts on the ground, we would determine that the person was lying and therefore made a fraudulent claim.
Do we have any numbers about how many were actually fraudulent under that definition you just explained?
No, we don't have any numbers on how many people are making fraudulent claims either in credible fear or in regular asylum yet, but we're working on that.
Do you have any numbers on how many asylum claims were denied by USCIS in recent years that have led to perjury charges?
No, I don't have that available.
Could you get those to me in writing?
Sure.
If you could, that would be great. I want to also touch upon the incident that occurred, the Montana incident. The CBP has about a 100-mile radius of jurisdiction where you can, engage with somebody, pull somebody over for reasonable suspicion of an immigration violation or a crime. Is that correct, roughly?
Roughly, yes. The court, through case law, has given us jurisdiction to do a number of things near the immediate border, loosely defined at 100 miles.
And if you take a look at the map, like most of Los Angeles alone is in that because of the West being on the coast, correct?
I think that's true for a number of coastal states.
How often would you say a CBP officer is going to engage with somebody and start questioning them about their status just because they're speaking Spanish? How often do you think that's happening? I
don't think it happens very often at all. I think that they're trained to do a number of things and look at a number of factors before they make an encounter, they make a stop for someone. In this case, it was roughly 40 miles or so from the border.
Okay, so should I advise my constituents that are within 40 miles of the border, they shouldn't be speaking Spanish anymore?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Okay, what advice could you give? Because, look, I speak Spanish. It was my first language. It's actually an asset in this country to be able to speak two languages, especially Spanish. So there's a shortage of actually workers who employers seek to speak two languages, and Spanish is often one of them. I get questions now of, well, does this mean I shouldn't speak Spanish anymore? As somebody who's at CBP, what advice do you think I should give them?
I'm not sure. A number of social engagements. I've worked on the border for many years. I speak Spanish myself. It's not something that people should be concerned about if they're here illegally.
And in this case, the people actually showed ID, even though they didn't have to, and they were still detained for another 35 to 40 minutes. You know, what is, in that case, what is somebody supposed to do? You've shown your ID, you're still being detained.
I would like for our Office of Professional Responsibility to do a complete review of the incident, and then I'm happy to come back or put in the record, if it's done by then, the total circumstance of that case.
Okay, if that happens to somebody, are they allowed to pull out their cell phone and just start documenting that they're being held for, 35 to 40 minutes or whatever it is?
Our agents are regularly filmed in the performance of their duties, and CBP has made an investment in changing policy and allowing for us to use incident-driven video recording. So we're going to be investing in and deploying a number of cameras in the workspace. Some of those will be actually worn by agents.
And agents are not going to delete the videos, right?
There's a whole policy that surrounds how we use the video and how it's stored and collected and et cetera.
Great, thank you, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. In summary, as we wrap up, I want to thank the gentlemen for their testimony today.